All right, we are live during Caleb Williams Pro Day in Los Angeles, but we're here to talk about free agency. We are now pretty much through the bulk of free agency. Obviously, there's still some good players that are left out there. Justin Simmons, Quandre Diggs, a lot of those veteran safeties that got cut before free agency kicked off. But the bulk, a lot of the good players, a lot of the big contracts have been handed out. And I know that we wanted to talk about some of our favorite signings to the whole thing. Obviously, talk about our teams and maybe some other teams in their division, and then talk about other teams around the league that we think got better over free agency. And again, I said it in the last episode we did, I don't think anybody's winning a Super Bowl based off their free agency signings. I think it does start in the draft, which is now in full swing with the bulk of free agency over. So excited to get more into that season. I think, and you can give your input. I think my favorite time in football is like week one kickoff, and then after that it's the draft and then free agency. So
Yeah,
it's
I
a
think
good
that's
time of the year.
fair. Yeah, I mean, I think week one has all that anticipation. You get to see it come to fruition. But I mean, off season is where your team building happens. Which if you're like me, and I feel like if you're like you, that's just what we love to see is all the team building.
Yeah, and it's a time where week one there's certainly less fans that are confident in their team as they are right now. All 32 teams right now think they can win the Super Bowl, except maybe the Panthers. But
Yeah, I was about to say there might be a couple out there that
there are,
don't
there are a
necessarily
couple.
think that.
The Giants, who I guess are getting JJ McCarthy now, but we can start. Do you want to start with individual players or do you want to start with teams?
Um, let's go with players, and then we'll work into teams.
Okay. Yeah, so
Uh,
I'll start with one of my favorites. I've got seven names written down. And one of my favorites, he was one of my favorites entering free agency because I didn't know how a 24-year-old safety, well, I knew how he got let go of. It's because the Giants didn't have any damn money. Uh, and for him to fall into the Green Bay Packers lap, Xavier McKinney to the Packers isn't, it's not only one of my favorite fits in this free agency, it was one of my favorite guys out there at a position of need for a team that just took the Niners to the wire in the NFC playoffs and are one of the youngest teams in football. And a guy who is younger than Sam Hartman, who's coming out in this year's draft, hits the market at a position of need and they scoop him up. Um, yeah, Xavier McKinney right away was, as soon as it happened, I don't care what money they threw at him. It was one of my favorite signings of the entire process.
yeah, he was definitely hands down one of the top 10 free agents on the board, and he's definitely the top safety. So I mean, um, no surprise that he got signed like that, but also definitely some bitterness that he got signed to the youngest team in the NFL right now that's
Yeah.
successful. So that hurts.
And it was
Uh,
$17 million a year. People were projecting 13 million, but I think
yeah,
again, like they're so young and they nailed it with the Jordan Love contract extension when they did it
they
to
really
where
did.
they delayed having to pay him big money because they talked him into signing before he got to really play. Um, so maybe bad advice from his agent, maybe good advice from his agent because now they're building a super team around him. They're getting really
Yeah,
really good really fast, um, and I think they'll definitely compete for the NFC North next year, which is shaping up to be a very competitive division. We'll talk about the Lions and the Bears, I'm sure, at some point in this episode, but
yeah.
the Packers on the right track, and yeah, McKinney fits right in.
Yeah, I think McKinney is perfect for that team. That's why once I started thinking about it, I wasn't very surprised they signed him and made him a priority. I mean, that's huge. For me, I think the most obvious one I've got, and you might have it written down, Derrick Henry.
Yep.
He is my favorite fit in all of this free agency. I mean, there is no easier. I mean, it was talked about trade deadline for the past 2 years. He's obviously on the decline, but he's not, you know, a bad back by any means. In that
Hmm.
offense, he's going to be insane. He's going to capitalize on lower touches, but more impactful touches with a great O line. People are going to have to worry about the RPO between Lamar Jackson, Zay Flowers, and Derrick Henry, and that's just terrifying. Most defenses are going to have nightmares the night before on him. So he's definitely a great fit. And to get him for 2 for 16, that's pretty good. I mean, eight a year for a guy who can easily rattle off 150 yards with 10 to 15 touches. I mean, that's a no brainer for them.
Yeah, their red zone packages are going to be uh, pretty
Nuts.
tough to beat, and especially the AFC North and a lot of they just kind of traded players around in division.
Yep.
Um, we're talking about tough divisions. That is the best division in football, but you have to win by just dominating the other team on the ground, and I think that the Ravens have the best formula for that in the division, um, where the Bengals have like Zach Moss and the Steelers have Harrison Warren. The Ravens have Lamar and Derrick Henry. So I think uh, that move is a testament to how good that division is and how they want to play football in that division. And I don't think you're going to be able to stop them inside the 10-yard line.
Yeah, that run game is insane.
I will move on to. I thought I might be able to say division, but I'm not. I'm going to go back to the NFC North. I every time I watched the Raiders play last year, there was a guy in their secondary that
Hmm.
jumped off the TV, and it was Amik Robertson
Yeah.
as this kind of nasty, undersized, physical corner, and he ends up with maybe the organization that preaches the most nasty physical style of football with the Detroit Lions. And not only that, but they also went and traded for Carlton Davis from the Bucks, rebuilding this secondary that last year had Cameron Sutton, who as of today is on the run for domestic violence. I think the police have been searching for him for 2 weeks in Florida, from the last
Yeah.
tweet that I just saw. Uh, so obviously, I'm sure the Lions knew that they had to do something there. But they go get Davis and Robertson, who both play physical styles of football. They were lacking that true CB1 last year, and they made it to the NFC Championship. And now they bring in two guys who I think fit their style of play. I think that when you reach an NFC Championship, it feels hard to upgrade anywhere. But I think they upgraded both their corners and didn't do it for very much. Robertson was a deal worth $4.5 million this year, and Carlton Davis was uh, straight up for a third rounder, and then they picked up two six rounders. So they upgraded. The Lions got better.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I love the Lions. I think they're the easy team um, to upgrade just because I don't think they belonged in that game. Not that they aren't
Mm,
great, not that they didn't have a great year, but I think they did have a glaring weakness at cornerback. I mean, that was a very large and glaring error that they had. So that's why I was surprised that they got to that game. No offense to them. I mean, props to them for making it. But I think that makes these signings absolute no brainers for them because that's what they needed. They've got most of the positions set. Their offensive line is one of the best in the NFL. Goff is better than average. He's good
mm,
enough. Gibbs is elite. Laporta is elite. Amon-Ra is elite. The rest of their defense, Anzalone is a dog on that
yeah,
linebacking core. Now that D line just got even better because I think
they got DJ
yeah they
Reader.
got DJ Reader, which is one of
Yeah,
mine, and his is actually for me. I have him in there for a great value.
mm,
DJ Reader has been dominant. He was dominant at Houston. We let him go for some reason. He went to the Cincinnati Bengals, has been absolutely wrecking games. I don't know why they let him go, but they did. And now the Lions got him for 2 for 27 at 13 a year for an
yeah,
elite defensive tackle to help with all those young guys on the edge with Aiden Hutchinson. I mean, that was a great signing for them, and just for them to fill that glaring need at cornerback and add to that already great defensive line. I think they now belong in that title game, if not even further. So definitely a great free agency for them.
yeah. I think they'll be back at least close, and I do think that the Bears and Packers got better in their division. You could argue that whatever the Vikings do with this pick, they get better. But they were a team that we had, and most people had continuously mocked cornerback and interior defensive line to them, and then they fill that need. So this is what I was talking about when I was saying, free agency, post free agency is really when we get to have fun with the mock drafts
Yep.
because we really understand what teams need. And I think that the Lions have put themselves in a spot where they pick at 28th or 29th, I believe, to take the best player available. And if they think that they just made the NFC Championship and they just improved areas of weakness and they want to sacrifice the next year or two and move up for an even a more premier player, I think they're in a spot to do that. Um, so I think the mock drafts with the Lions these next couple of weeks are going to be really fun.
Yeah, they're definitely in that tier with the 49ers at this point where they can do whatever they want. If that, like you said, if they want to mortgage a little bit of the near future, go for a great guy, move up, that's awesome. I think that'll fit them. If they want to move back and just start collecting capital for later years, I think that'll work. If they want to sit and pick best player available, that'll work. They're very much like the 49ers at this point where it's just do whatever you want. You really can't do anything wrong. Which is a very, very fortunate place to be when you're in the NFL. You don't get to that point very often. So if they can keep it up, I think they're in a golden situation. So after talking about them, I'll go back to my favorite signings. This might be a hot take. I don't know how you feel about him. I love the fit for Darnell Mooney to the Falcons. I've always been a big fan of Mooney. Unfortunately, he has not done great, but let's be fair, none of the Bears have. And I'm also a fan of Fields, and he hasn't done great. So obviously, I hope for the best for Fields going over to Steelers. I think that'll do well for him. His mentor is Russell Wilson, so that was kind of cool to see. But I just think this new scenario for the Falcons, for Mooney in there, I mean, you've got plenty of guys to take the attention off of him, so he's got no excuses there. He's not going to be double-teamed habitually. He's got Drake London, a great young receiver on the other side. He's got Kyle Pitts on the inside. He's got Bijan Robinson in the backfield. There's no reason he should have any kind of coverage concerns. If he can't break loose in a scenario where he's got those three guys and they're probably getting double-teamed and he's not, it might be the writing on the wall to say, hey, maybe I was wrong on this guy. But definitely he adds that clear-cut wide receiver too for the Falcons, adds a talented guy. My favorite thing about him, so I don't know how much you know about him, but I was really big on him coming out. His first year he did pretty good. His second year didn't do great. So then he decided, him and his dad bought a jugs machine, and he said he basically sat on it and did a minimum of 200 catches a day from this jugs machine right in front of it. So like 6 inches off the jugs, just took the passes as best he can to improve his hands, because that was what he was faulted for on that year two. That decline is, he dropped some major passes, so he was like, you know what, screw it, let me make no excuse for myself. And then this third year happened, and honestly, I don't know what the Bears were doing. They started out great, but who knows? And so I'm a big fan of him. I'm hoping he's going to do well. Got a 3 for 39, 13. I think that's a steep ask for a guy who only produced his rookie year, really.
Yeah, that was going to be my one contesting point. Is the money felt?
Oh yeah,
maybe like it was a little much.
It was definitely an overpay. I think Pro Football Focus had him at like 9 a year, and really thought he was going to get like a 1-year prove it deal. So Falcons went above and beyond. But I mean, if the Falcons feel the way I feel about him and they think he's going to turn out, and he does turn out for these next 3 years, that's a bargain. But it's a risky one, that's for sure. So that's why he's on my favorite fits and not favorite costs, because dude was expensive, but I have faith he can live up to that cost at least.
Yeah, I think they're betting on just the vertical ability of Mooney to add. I think London is a little bit, certainly less of a vertical receiver, more of a underneath technician, strong hands. Kind of in the mold of a St. Brown or a Pittman or that type of receiver. So you get somebody who can take the top off. Mooney showed he could do that multiple times. It was up to whether or not Fields could hit him, whether or not he caught it. There's a lot of stuff going on in Chicago that went against him. But I think now's a time we could also segue into Kirk Cousins in Atlanta now, where I saw arguments on Twitter. Maybe not arguments, but there's the question posed that was like, do you think Kirk is in a better situation now in Atlanta? And it's like, no. Like he had Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson in Minnesota, and T.J. Hawkinson, and I think if Kirk maybe had his way, he would bring Justin Jefferson with him to Atlanta. I think that alone probably makes them a better situation up in Minnesota. But it's a solid team in Atlanta, and I think they do maybe still have additions to make. I think that. Zach Robinson in LA, they highlight multiple receivers in that Rams offense. They did. McVay loves to. Last year he brought in, dude from the Jaguars. Now I forget his name. I can't come up with it. I'm looking it up.
I was about to say, I'm not even for sure who you're talking about.
I picked him up on my fantasy team. Was it Robinson? Denard Robinson? I haven't seen the name yet. Demarcus Robinson, not Denard Robinson.
Yeah.
Demarcus Robinson.
Yep.
So, I mean, you had Puka and Cup, obviously, but then you had Demarcus Robinson making big catches. And then early in the year, you had Tutu Atwell making big catches. So I think there's work to do uh, in terms of getting another receiver in there. I think Mooney may be best served as a third option, somebody who can work out of the slot, work over the middle of the field, get open. Um, and then in this receiver class, obviously it's deep. So maybe, in that 40th pick range, I think with their second round, maybe that's a Xavier Legette out of South Carolina or a Lad McConkey from Georgia to keep him in state. Um, but Kirk, to me, it felt like a ton of money. It's a
Yeah.
big investment for a guy who is 35 years old and coming off a torn Achilles, which has been the kiss of death in sports for a while. Now, I think that you have, Kevin Durant tore his Achilles and seems to be okay. I think that sports medicine is advancing to where it's not the end of a guy, but it's not the injury that you want your old quarterback to have and then
Yeah.
pay him over $100 million over, the next few years. So I was curious to hear your thoughts on his contract as well.
Yeah, I thought it. I'll be honest. At first, I took it and I said, "Holy cow, that's a ridiculous amount of money." Um, and then I started thinking, do I hate it that much? I don't know that I do. I think the Falcons had to find an answer. I think they've got Bijan, they've got Kyle, they've got Drake. I think they had to figure something out because they tried drafting, and I get it. It was Desmond Ritter. They drafted him in like the second or third round, so it wasn't like they were expecting him to be phenomenal. Cool. They brought in Taylor Heineke. He didn't work. I think they were running out of time to play this carousel of which quarterback will it be next year, which quarterback will it be the year after that, and they just got tired and said, you know what? Let's get this proven commodity. Let's get him for it's 40 a year, but at the same point, I mean, you've got guys like Baker and like Goff, who are going to get very similar numbers. I think Baker got what 40. I think he actually got 40 a year as well. I
Mm.
I don't. I think that's just standard where the quarterback market's going. Sadly, and I hate that because I get that they're so vital to their team, but you look at a team like the Browns who they built the rest of their team phenomenally and brought in a 40-year-old Joe Flacco and went to the playoffs and did
Yeah.
really well.
Yeah.
And I think that's a case where we're at. I think the injury doesn't scare me too much just because Kirk Cousins is the epitome of a statue in the pocket. I mean, dude does
Yeah, he
not run
doesn't move.
around.
Yeah.
So it's definitely fearsome in the athletics department, but in the same sense of it doesn't hurt him too much because at the same point he wasn't using it too much. I'm honestly surprised he tore it. Um, but but yeah, I think they paid a lot, but I think they paid a lot because they were like, you know what, we're just tired of it. We've drafted a really great team. We've got a team that can offensively absolutely dog walk some defenses, and the
Yeah.
reason we're not is because we haven't brought in this star quarterback. So let's just finish that off, draft for defense, and try and make a run in this weak NFC South division.
Yeah, I think that was the point I was going to make next is that if your goal is to win the NFC South, at least how it looks on March 20th, I think you've done it. Obviously, you
Yeah,
have to go out and still do it, but you are the best team in the NFC South. Um, and the defense was solid last year, and I think you can make um, draft additions to the defense if you wanted to. Obviously, still need that premier edge rusher. Dallas Turner is continuously mocked to them, but Raheem Morris is your defensive coordinator now. Zach Robinson, who I've brought up, is kind of following the whole situation reminds me of what the Texans did at their head coach and offensive coordinator, where you brought in a guy that players love. With last year when there were the head coach openings, Morris was a finalist for the Colts before they signed Steichen, and everybody only talked about how Raheem Morris was a player's coach through and through, and
mm-hmm.
that guys loved playing for him. And Sean McVay cultivated that in LA for sure. But now you bring in a guy that players like to play for, a defensive minded guy who's fired up, aka a D'Amico Ryan's Raheem Morris type,
Yep,
and then you bring in the former PFF employee to be your offensive coordinator. Both Zach Robinson and Bobby Slowick were at
yep,
PFF,
yep.
turned into coaches, and obviously Slowick had a good year last year for the Texans. Zach Robinson projects coming out of the McVay system to be really really good with all these weapons. So I'm excited about the Falcons. I think that it is a lot of money for Kirk Cousins, maybe, but I think they're trying to win the division again, and at least for the next 1 or 2 years, I think that it's all out there in front of them to do it.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely like it. You're gonna see later. Falcons are one of my teams that I love for this free agency period. But
Mm.
we'll move back up to the north, and we'll go with one of my favorite signings. Not great values, probably a decent value, but not like great. Aaron Jones to the Vikings.
Yeah.
That whole situation with the Vikings and Packers completely. I don't understand what they were thinking. I love what the Packers are doing, so that's why it's confusing to me. But at the same sense, I'm not quite understanding where you compute with. Hey, we've got Aaron Jones, this proven Pro Bowl All Star. Not that Pro Bowl means much anymore, but
Right.
he's a talent, a great talent, one of the better running backs in the league, and not for the same things that like Jonathan Taylor or Derrick Henry are known for. He's going to get you great yards per carry. He's going to hammer the football. He's give it to him every down. Instead, Aaron Jones is one of those guys who he's going to give you a carry, and listen, he may give you -2 yards. He may give you 2 yards, but on like a random carry, like ninth, eighth carry, he's going to break it off for a 70-yard touchdown. His
Yeah.
explosiveness is next level. And he's at that point where you got guys like I said, Jonathan Taylor can do that, and that is what he's game. But he's also a hammer that every touch he's getting is 4 or 5 yards. I mean, he's just
Mm.
ridiculous. Aaron Jones isn't at that level still, but he is at the level where it is still incredibly valuable. So they bring in Josh Jacobs in free agency, and oh, okay, so you got your hammer in Josh Jacobs, and you got your explosion in Aaron Jones. That's awesome. That's a better duo than Aaron Jones and
AJ
who was
Dillon.
their AJ Dillon.
Yeah.
So like, oh cool, I see what they're doing, and then they release Aaron Jones, and you're like, what are you doing? I no longer see what you're doing. That just doesn't make sense. And then of all places, they let him go to a division rival in the Vikings, who are desperately needing a running back, and now have this aging but also super talented running back, and for pretty cheap. So I love that signing for the Vikings. I think they've been lacking a running back ever since Dalvin Cook took that dive off the cliff.
Hmm.
Straight free fall. Who knows what happened there? But now they have Aaron Jones, another guy who's going to be pretty reliable for them if they can sort out. And maybe Sam Darnold's their answer at quarterback, but their trade with draft picks makes me think it's not, and they're moving up. But either way, I think if they've got decent play at that quarterback spot, they're a terrifying team still.
Yeah. It's the whole situation, like you talked about, was interesting, and I do think a lot of it has to do with the Packers' commitment to get even younger. It does feel like Josh Jacobs has been around forever, but he just turned 26. I'm a big Josh Jacobs fan. I have been. Somebody I talked, maybe it was on Twitter, maybe it was something that was like, I don't know, feels like mid, smells like mid. Josh Jacobs going to the Packers. And I was like, Jacobs just won the rushing crown in 2022, and in 2023 was limited by an offense that wasn't very good.
Yeah, but what
So I
about
feel like
2020 and 2021?
I mean, yeah, I guess he wasn't great.
I'll say I'm with the mid comment. I agree with that. But
Really,
go on. Yeah,
I see.
I am.
I guess I'm more of a Josh Jacobs fan than most. Maybe I think that it does feel kind of like a lateral move, maybe in terms of the caliber of running back. But I think that they're banking so much on the fact that he just turned 26 and Jones is going to be 30 during the season next year, where Jones still gives you a lot, and I think that he'll be great with the Vikings. I think as a receiving threat, um, something that you mentioned, he's awesome. He's still up there as one of the top backs. Swing routes and halfback screens and all these different things that the Packers like to do with him. Um, but I think Jones is capable of doing the same type of stuff. I think he's also, or not Jacobs, not Jones. I think Jacobs is capable of doing the same. He's also wearing number 8 for the Packers, so he passes the number test. Um, I think if anything, it was a negligible upgrade, or not an upgrade at all, and it's really just their commitment to getting younger.
Yeah, I could see that. My one problem with Josh Jacobs is he's kind of what I said. He's the opposite of Aaron Jones. I don't see an
Hmm.
explosion with Josh Jacobs. Don't get me
Yeah,
wrong. He had the great year, 2022. I know he put up a 50 burger on me on fantasy on playoffs. So like, don't get me wrong. I understand what he can do. But at the same point, I see him in every game I've watched. They give it to him, and he hits straight up the middle. It doesn't look like he's looking at lanes. It doesn't look like he's looking at blocking it. It just seems like he's like, oh hey, I got the ball, let me run. And that's good. He's got enough raw talent that he makes it work, and he is a very serviceable running back. But I just don't see that explosion that I see in the top backs from him. I don't see him breaking off countless runs. He breaks off one or two here a season. Outside of last year, or outside of 2022, he breaks off one or two a season. Really, I mean, 2020, 2021, he came out highly touted and just showed nothing for me. So that's why when he broke out in 2022 and everyone was like, "Oh, Josh Jacobs, yeah, to the moon, whatever," I was just like, I don't believe it. I don't believe it when I've seen 2 years of nothing and 1 year of something. You're gonna have to show me at least 1 or 2 more years of something for me to believe that you are something. And last year just wasn't enough for me. And I get that offense kind of sucked, but also they had a game where they put up 60 plus points against the
Yes,
Chargers.
70, whatever that
Yeah,
was.
I mean, I
Yeah,
honestly, I'll be honest, I like Zamir White better than Josh Jacobs, and I think that's verified by what the Raiders are doing. Now I know they want
yeah,
to go young too, so there's a little essence there, but I I liked Zamir White. Dude was electric. He broke off some really big plays in his limited usage. To me, I agree with what the Raiders did in letting Josh Jacobs go, keeping Zamir White, and then I just yeah, I don't know about the Packers. I think, like you kind of said, I can agree. It's kind of just a lateral move. It's just they paid more money.
yeah. And I think a lot of what a running back is the running scheme. So it's such kind of a obviously you have guys that are elite running backs, and like you can't
Mm-hmm.
duplicate those top 4 or 5 guys in the league right now. But with the Aaron Jones in his older stages and the Josh Jacobs level of guys, where it's maybe like the top 9 to 15 running back range somewhere in there, I think that Matt LaFleur is betting that a player like Jacobs can come into his scheme and produce. So I think it's the jury is still out maybe on that whole kind of switcheroo type deal. And I think obviously Aaron Jones is going to want to put up hundreds of yards on the Packers twice a year. But
Oh
so I
yeah,
think both teams
all
are
bets
are
are
going to be
going on
fun.
Aaron Jones on those weeks.
Yeah, and the Vikings, is Ty Chandler still there? I don't know if they really have anybody to compete with Jones for carries too much. Maybe obviously
No,
they draft somebody,
yeah, no.
um, but yeah.
Yeah,
And so
I think they definitely signed him to have him be the starter for sure.
I would assume so. Take some pressure off Sam Darnold.
Yeah.
Um, I've got 2 receivers. Well, I've got 2 defensive backs and 2 receivers left. I'll talk about the 2 receivers. One of them was a trade, and it was
mm.
we screamed in our not screamed. We didn't scream in the mock draft. We talked about get Bryce Young somebody who can get open,
Yep.
please. And they went and traded for Deontay Johnson. And if there's one thing Deontay Johnson knows how to do, it's get open. He's a true
Oh
route
yeah.
technician. He is, if somebody wanted to comp Lad McConkey, who we said the Panthers should draft at 33, to Deontay Johnson, I think that's a fair comparison. I think they play a similar style of football. And I think that Deontay Johnson gives Bryce Young a safety blanket, and it also gives the Panthers, who they traded Dante Jackson and a pick swap for him. Like they didn't pay much for him, but he's there now, and he gives them an option at 33 and 39 to go with a more explosive receiver. If an AD Mitchell gets to 33, if a Worthy gets there, maybe you can start to see the groundwork for this offense that was so bad. They went and signed 2 guards to protect Bryce Young. They paid big money to Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt. Um, they went and got Deontay Johnson, who's the route tech who can get open. They're laying the groundwork, and obviously they whiffed on the whole Brian Burns situation, but things are trending upward. I think that next year they will be, and especially post draft, they will be more watchable than they were this year because they were completely unwatchable.
God, I hope
But
so.
I loved the Deontay Johnson trade.
Yeah, I do. I had that on mine, so that works perfect. Like you said, there's not much more to say. Honestly, is they desperately needed someone, and I think the cheapest guy that they could get was the perfect guy in Deontay Johnson. I don't know that they really had to do too much. Now I love Dante Jackson, so that hurts. But
Really?
at the same point, they don't need him.
Yeah.
They don't need to have to sign him and worry about his contract, stuff like that. So that helps them in that sense. Also gets them a receiver, helps out their young quarterback that they spent the 101 last year and the 101 this year on. And it just solidifies that and helps Bryce Young be successful. And I'm still a fan of Bryce Young. I still
Yeah.
think he's going to be good. I think he has great potential. And as much as I hate to say it, because it's not really a thing to say, but he had no protection. He had no weapons.
Yeah.
And I get that is a valid to an extent, but also people were saying that about CJ Stroud last year and see how that went, but whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, I still do believe in Bryce Young, and I think getting him Deontay Johnson, a receiver who's an absolute technician in the route running, is going to only be best for both of them. Deontay was obviously frustrated in that Steelers offense, not getting the
Yeah. Oh,
ball
yeah.
without a quarterback. I think this is a good move for both the Panthers and the Steelers to offload a dude who may be a little bit tired of being there, and then to also help out the Panthers get another weapon on offense.
I think Johnson was only going to be continuously frustrated in Pittsburgh too because Russell Wilson is not the quarterback to throw to the wide receiver two on the team. So George
Yeah,
Pickens' stock is way up. Deontay Johnson's stock was going down, so they shipped him out uh, to where he can be happy somewhere else. I think it worked out for all parties.
for sure. Who was your second guy?
The second receiver,
Mm-hmm.
Hollywood Brown to Kansas City.
Okay. Yep. Yep.
Uh, this Kansas City last year, their receiving core was Rasheed Rice and Marquez Valdez Scantling and Kadarius Toney going into the year. And everybody's like, this sucks. Like, this receiving core is bad. And then they won the Super Bowl. So now you're going into next year with Rasheed Rice and Hollywood Brown and potentially a receiver that you take in the first round of this draft. And everyone's going, oh, that's a good receiving core. So in a year, where they won the Super Bowl in between. They've gone from a bad receiving core to a good receiving core. And I think Marquise Brown is the start of that. Obviously, Rasheed Rice's development was huge, but Marquise Brown is going to be good with Patrick Mahomes. I think it's a foregone. We don't have to guess too hard. I don't know. Maybe you feel differently, but somebody who can stretch the field like Brown can, that guy was supposed to be Marquez Valdez Scantling last year. Marquise Brown is a better player than Marquise Valdez Scantling. So
Yeah.
I'm
Don't
confident that Brown will be good.
don't don't get me wrong. I love Marquise Brown, and he's one of those players. I don't know why I love him, but I always have ever since his Baltimore days. I thought
Mm,
he was incredibly underutilized in Baltimore, and I thought they were like absolute imbeciles to trade him away to the Cardinals. I truly don't understand why they did that because Marquise Brown is an absolute weapon. I mean, he was a wide receiver one on the Cardinals, I think in 2022 for like the first 6 weeks when D Hop was suspended, and he
mm. Yeah, oh yeah,
ate defenses up. So I think you pair him with a decent quarterback, and he's a strong wide receiver. You pair him with the best quarterback in the NFL currently, and I mean you've got just a scary wide receiver, and then you've also got Rashi Rice who really developed,
yep,
absolutely developed over the course of the 18 weeks to the point where he looked like a natural. He
mm,
did not look like a rookie past week 8. And then once it was past like week 14 and into the playoffs, he looked like he'd been there for 3-4 years running routes with Pat Mahomes. He came in the clutch when Travis Kelsey was struggling, to be quite honest, in the season. When Travis Kelsey really wasn't doing much, it was because Rashi Rice was. And I think they really found a special receiver in that. And that's why I was excited for them to draft like an Adonai Mitchell or a Brian Thomas or something like that to get them two crazy wide receivers. But them signing Hollywood, I mean, that gives them the option of still taking one of those receivers and having one of the best trios in the NFL, or just drafting someone that they actually need in a different position outside of wide receiver, because now wide receiver really isn't a need for them. I mean,
yeah,
if Pat Mahomes can make it work with Rashi Rice, MVS, and Mecole Hardman,
yeah,
you don't need anything past Rashi Rice and Marquise Brown and then Travis Kelsey. I mean, I think they're set at the receivers, and if they get another receiver, that's just going to torment defenses. And if they go somewhere else, then they don't. That's what they need, you know. So, I that was my top signing for offense was Marquise Brown just because of his talent.
Yep.
And the fact that he went to that really wide receiver needy team and they got him for a decent price. I mean, 1 year, 7 mil. That's
It's
ridiculous for
fine.
a wide
Yeah.
receiver who can easily put up 1,000+ yards.
Yeah. I think if I could take bets on his over, whatever his yardage prop is at, I would consider that going into next year.
If it's not insanely high, then sports betting is an idiot. Which they're not, so I'm sure it
No,
is.
they're not. They're pretty sharp. Yeah, they're pretty good.
Yeah, they're pretty damn sharp.
Yeah.
So then I'll go. So I've got 2 defensive guys, and you've got 2 DBs, I think. So that'll work perfect. So my one guy is kind of a lower guy. He's not this huge big hitter or anything like that, but it's Josh Uche for the Pats. So I like him. I don't think like I said, I don't think he's any superstar or anything like that. I think he's a solid edge rusher, and great versatility on him. What I really loved is, and this is, I am, there's a soft place in my heart for guys that do this, and
I was going to ask if you
disagree.
knew the story behind this contract. Yeah.
Yep, I disagree with doing this. If I were an agent or something, I would never tell my player to do it. But it's just something that shows their dedication. So he signed a 1-year, $3 million contract, and it's been announced that he was offered a 2-year, $15 million contract.
Yeah.
So he passed up $12 million. Now, really, he passed up $4 million because it's a 1-year and versus a 2-year, but still, he passed up almost 50% of what he could have made to stay with a team because he believes in the team, he believes in the coach, and he believes in his own talents. He put a bet on me and took a little bit less to stay with the team to keep some continuity, which that's honestly been the Patriots' way. I mean, even when they had Bill Belichick, you stayed with the team. You kept you. If you wanted big money, you were gone because we're not going to pay you big money. But if you want to stay and be a part of this team and grow this team, take a team-friendly deal, we're going to keep you and we're going to grow you and we're going to make you the best. And that was huge when Tom Brady was around, obviously because Tom Brady did it. One of my favorite things to point out now is Kirk Cousins has now made more money guaranteed than Tom Brady made his entire 23 years, and Kirk Cousins only at 16, which is just, and it's by like 100 million. It's not even close, which is crazy. But yeah, so I just love that signing by the Patriots. I love that for Josh Uche. I hope he has one of the best years ever and gets paid next year. Just because doing something like that, I mean, that really shows, hey, I'm rooting for my team. I'm not rooting for me. So I love that.
Yeah, definitely betting on himself. I assumed that he went against what his agent was saying, which,
if his agent told him to do that, I'd be shocked.
yeah, I would have to assume his agent was trying to get paid elsewhere. But it is, I mean, betting on the system with Gerard Mayo, there isn't much else to say about it. I was going to talk about that if you hadn't talked about it. So, yeah, Anuche is, I think, a solid player, and it's a guy who wasn't probably he was making close to $3 million on his rookie deal, and then he gets a chance for a second contract and says, I'll take $3 million again for another year, and go get paid next year. So I'm with you. I hope he does. I hope he has a good year.
Yeah.
I've got Dolphins cornerback Kendall Fuller as another one, who was a Colts target to my understanding, and I think if he wasn't, he should have been. I'm not the biggest fan of PFF. He was 5th or 6th last year in terms of coverage. Nobody really talked about him because he was on the Commanders and they stunk. He's a vet. He's been around for a while. He's been good for a while. And the Dolphins lose Xavier Howard. I think they upgrade with a player like Kendall Fuller for $7.5 million a year. It was I think that was under the value that he was given on most sites that were looking into this.
Yeah,
so
by a lot.
It was a bargain in terms of value deals. It's by far one of them, and I think he's just one of the best players to come off the board in free agency. And the Dolphins, who lost a lot with Christian Wilkins and Andrew Van Ginkel, they quietly had a really good free agency in terms of replenishing positions that they needed to.
They really did. Yeah, I was looking through all their guys, and I was shocked because I thought, like we understood, they were lacking money. And they still made some crazy good signings. So I was really happy with them. But yeah, no, I love Fuller to them. I wasn't the biggest Fuller fan because everyone was predicting he was getting like 15 a year. And I think 15 a year for Fuller is crazy. I think that's just way too much for that age. I get he's still good and he's been good for a while, but 15 a year is crazy.
Yeah, no, it's
Two
expensive.
two for 16 is awesome. I think an
Yep.
$8 million corner who's shown he's a top 20 corner in the NFL who can easily sit right in next to Jalen Ramsey and really be unlocked with those two. I think that saves him a lot losing Xavier Howard. I think Xavier Howard got cut for a reason. He's obviously
Hmm.
lost the step. He's not the elite corner he was. Um, is he still very good? Sure. But he's not the elite guy that Kendall Fuller can come in and be. So I think that was a very savvy move by them, and actually they got him for a pretty good deal. Um, so then that moves me to my last guy on this, and this is a, I mean, I guess you can say it's a value, but it's really just the talent fit. Brian Burns, the trade with
Hmm.
Brian Burns. I don't think we can go through a free agency and not talk about that.
Yeah.
His contract, 28 a year. I mean, that's expensive, but for a guy 24, 25 years old coming in, can absolutely wreck defenses single-handedly. Well, he had some help from Frankie Louvu, but I mean,
Yeah.
outside of him, he carried that Carolina defense. So I think getting him, putting him next to Sexy Dexy and Kayvon Thibodeau, who really came into his own last year, showed why he was picked where he was picked. I mean, I think that defensive line and that pass rush gets very scary for those Giants. So if they can figure it out on the offensive end, whether it's going to be Daniel Jones or if they're going to try and get a rookie or something and say screw it on the Daniel Jones contract, who knows? But I think they're secretly building a scary good defense, and they've got some pieces on offense that could do something. Especially, well, it kind of hurts them now with Darren Waller retiring, but
Yeah.
they still do have Daniel Bellinger, who they really liked before they even brought in Darren Waller. So I'll be interested to see what Daniel Bellinger does. But I think the Giants aren't as bad off as everyone's thinking. I think they're quietly, pretty mid, but I mean they've got a chance to be good as well.
Yeah, I think they're in New York, and the GM and the owner, Joe Shane, the GM, understands that we have to at least be watchable. We can't,
Mm-hmm.
be bad and unwatchable in New York City. Well, I guess
Yep.
East Rutherford, New Jersey. But so if their offense turns out to be completely unwatchable, they're giving you one of the best pass rushes in the league to tune in at least on Sundays and pay attention to, with Lawrence and Burns and Thibodeau. And I guess hoping Ojolari takes another step. Colts legend Bobby Okereke back there at linebacker, who's a good player. Uh, they lost McKinney, I guess. So the secondary maybe still needs to be addressed, but a good corner takes away one receiver. A good pass rush takes away all of them. And the Giants have built a solid unit down there.
And
Now,
don't be low on Deontay Banks now. You better put some respect
no,
on that boy's
no,
name. He played good.
yeah, no. Deontay Banks is solid, but I guess is it still Adoree Jackson as the other one? They might need to. They
They
still
lost
need
him in
maybe
free
another
agency,
piece.
so they
Did they?
definitely need another one. But
Yeah, they need
uh,
somebody else.
yeah, yeah,
But regardless, McKinney walking isn't ideal either. But the pass rush is going to be very, very good. And the offense, maybe they bring in a rookie quarterback, and now you're very watchable. If you're going to be
yep,
not, if the win column isn't going to be good, then you need to be watchable. And I
yeah,
think
for
that's what they're
sure.
going for. My last guy, kind of a value. He turns 25 years old in 4 days. So happy early birthday to Cam Curl, who signed with the Rams.
Um,
Um, Safety, again, another guy in that Washington defense who a bit overlooked because Washington wasn't very good, um, like Fuller, but is a young guy, a safety who come up and hit you. He's solid in coverage. I think he has something being that young that can be unlocked, and I think that there's really no better place to go for that than Sean McVay's culture that he's built with the Rams. Who it doesn't, last year I think proved I was one of the people who looked at their roster and said this team isn't any good. Like I don't think they're going to be worth anything. And then they were very good. They were feisty every week and went to the
yep.
playoffs and, went toe to toe with the Lions, who went to the NFC Championship game. So, I was wrong on that. And I think if you're a player, Diana Rossini of The Athletic reported that out of the players she's talked to, the guy that seems to make the lasting impression in terms of, over the phone recruiting is Sean McVay. So whatever he's saying,
Yeah,
it translates to what he puts on the football field. It's a good team just about every year that Sean McVay's been there. So Cam Curl finds himself in a good situation, and I think the Rams find themselves in a good situation with a young safety who they hope to continue to put good stuff on a football field. But that wraps
Yeah,
me
no, I
up.
agree. I agree. Yeah, and I'm wrapped up as well. So we can go. How many teams do you have?
Um, I would kind of just roll and see what team gets brought up. I've got something to say for just about everybody, honestly.
Yeah.
Um,
So I'll start then.
yeah,
And I'm obviously going to start with my team, Houston Texans. I think we
yeah,
dominated free agency. I think this is a kind of a gimme one. I think a lot of people are opinionated except for some Texans fans, which is hilarious. We were talking about before we started recording, but just both of our teams have gone through the cycle of fire our GM. Oh wait, our GM's amazing. He's cooking. Let him cook, and then back to fire our GM, which is just
yeah,
makes zero sense. I mean, day one we didn't make a splash, and they were calling for Casario's head. Day two we signed Daniil Hunter. All of a sudden he's a god walking on water. Day three we're not signing greater stars. We're not bringing in Eric Armstead, and we're not bringing in Xavier McKinney, and it's just like fire Casario, and it's just ridiculous.
yeah.
But quietly and expertly, he has put on an absolute clinic. So obviously the easy ones, Daniil Hunter. I mean, bringing him in was huge. I think we got him on a 3-year contract. I think it's more of a technical 2-year contract with an out on that third year. But that gives us an A plus talent to put outside with Will Anderson Jr. And then we signed Danico Autry, who I don't know if I talked to about him on our free agency episode, but I love that dude. He
Mhm.
is inside and outside, which I think is perfect. That we're gonna mainly use him on the inside, I assume. But him in the inside is going to look great, especially with Will Anderson Jr. and Neil Hunter. And then you get a vet who has been elite for multiple years teaching our new rookie. And Will Anderson Jr. was great last year, and now I can't imagine what he's going to be with an actual mentor and someone who's been at the top of this game for so long and being able to teach him how to stay at that level and how to get to that level as well. I think another underrated signing was Noah Brown. I think a lot of Texans fans wanted a legit wide receiver 3 and wanted someone,
Mm.
obviously I think a lot of us were calling for T. Higgins and for Mike Williams and for some just obscene names. And yeah, cool, it's awesome. Let's bring in a great wide receiver. Cool, but you got to think we bring in T. Higgins. T. Higgins is an outside wide receiver. So are Nico and Dell. So who's getting put into that slot? Who's going to have to adjust? Well, it's probably going to be Dell. And honestly, Dell was worse in the slot than he was on the outside. He created all those big plays on that outside. So then I think you're diminishing some of our rookie skill and our younger guys' skill, and I just don't think it's worth it to then have to pay this guy an exorbitant amount of money and then turn around and have to pay Nico an exorbitant amount of money just to take away some from Dell. Now, one name, I'm sure you saw it, one name they were in the ranks for was Keenan Allen, which
Mm.
that would have been nice because Keenan is a slot guy. I mean, he loves that
Yeah,
slot, and I think sliding him into the slot with those two on the outside would have been crazy, but also it's not needed. I don't think it's needed. I think Noah Brown showed he can be a wide receiver 3. He can be the guy that if, Tank Dell, Lord forbid, gets another injury, he can step in and really have that same explosiveness. He's just older, which
yeah,
isn't ideal, but at the same point, we're talking about wide receiver 3. We don't need a T. Higgins at wide receiver 3. It's just not worth it. It's not worth building like that. Another name I love, Al Shire. He's an
mm.
every down linebacker, and we were in brutal need for that. I was wishing we would bring back Cashman, but I
Yeah,
kind of saw the writing on the wall that we weren't going to, and it's unfortunate. But I mean, you bring in Al Shire, he's got some history with D'Amico, and I love that. So I'm definitely happy with those guys. I mean, that definitely boosts our defense huge. We just brought in a Mario Edwards. He's nothing special, but he'll at least help on that interior of the defensive line, kind of what I was
mm.
talking. I will say one of the biggest hits that I did not expect happening was us losing Cam Johnston.
Yeah.
That was personal. That hurt. I saw that he signed elsewhere, and that hurt my soul
At
because I just
Pittsburgh, I think.
yeah,
I think it's
he went to
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh, and
Yeah,
it hurts my soul. That dude was a baller. I get it. He was getting older, and honestly, once I saw we replace him with Tommy Townsend, it didn't really hurt. But at the same point, it is sad to see a guy like Cam Johnston leaving us after we put so much into him. We've done so much with him, and then we just let him walk now. Like I said, he's older, so I get it. We're aging down, but it does hurt to see a career guy leave. And then other notable guys are Fatu Kasi, who's going to be good. Folo, he's a good interior guy. Jeff Okuda on the cornerback. He's a former number round one pick. and I think he's got some talent there. I'm hoping D'Amico can bring out that what they saw in the draft in him way back, but we'll see about that. I still think we need to address cornerback pretty bad.
Mm.
Um, but then we brought in also some special teamers too, like Lonnie Johnson, which was pretty good. And obviously, like we did before even free agency hit, we re-signed like Dalton Schultz and stuff, which was happy. And then the other big signing, Joe Mixon. I still don't know how I feel about it after
Yeah,
extending him. I think there's a lot to see about it. There's a lot to be excited for, and there's also a lot to be nervous about with that guy. But I mean, any guy that can score 5 touchdowns in one game, I guess I can't be mad
sure.
at it.
Yeah, I mean, the Texans are pretty clearly betting on the next 1 to 2 years, and
Yeah,
I think they took the steps in order of accomplishing that. I think there's the kind of debate with Gernard and Hunter, where Gernard was younger and I believe came out a little bit cheaper, or maybe right
yeah.
around the same money,
I
a
think
little
like
bit cheaper.
3 or 4 mil a year cheap.
Yeah, but they replace him with Hunter, who, you know, they lose their top edge rusher, replace him with another team's top edge rusher, and a little bit older, but again, betting on the next 1 to 2 years, trying to get that production right away. So,
Yeah,
the Grenard Hunter debate I saw being had on Twitter, you can't really be mad either way. I don't think. I think Hunter's a great player.
yeah,
I liked Shire, Aziz Al-Shire, to shore up like Cashman, who they had to replace. But like you mentioned, a guy who's been in D'Amico Ryan's system before, was fine in Tennessee, from what I remember. Autry was a Colts legend, uh, also in Tennessee. Now needs just to play for Jacksonville to finish the AFC South rotation. But a guy who is productive at his age, and you kind of look at his uh, the way he plays, and you wonder why he's productive, but he just makes things happen.
yeah.
Uh, that's a guy you need on the interior. So I think that was a fine signing. I'm just kind of harping on everybody you've already talked about. I mean, it's your
I
favorite
tried to
team,
cover
so
them
you
all.
you get
Yeah,
to
yeah,
you get to talk about it. I agree though. The corner is still in need. Okuda was
yeah.
a third overall pick, now on his second contract, entering his second contract with his third team. So obviously still has some question marks there. I think he's solid. I mean, you replaced Steven Nelson with him, right? So
Yeah.
it's okay. And then Mixon, I saw they were getting Mixon because the Bengals were releasing Mixon, and then
Mm-hmm.
it's like, no, the Texans are trading a seventh round pick for him, and I was like, okay, I don't know if you that needed to happen, but it did, so that happens, and then it's like, okay, Mixon's there, cool, it's better than they had to replace Devin Singletary, who was a solid back for them, but now they get a guy who's a little bit more dynamic. And then they extended him, and I was like, well, why'd they do that? I didn't necessarily understand that right away. Obviously, if he plays good, it makes a little bit more sense. But they are definitely they're investing in Joe Mixon, so they are betting that he's the guy that's going to be there for the next 2-3 years. Um, like I said, I think they're betting on winning now, and you can't fault them for it. The way Stroud played last year, they're trying to just put a better team around him. Obviously, they think they're going to be competitive after winning a playoff game. Um, so I think this is the offseason that people expected the Texans to have up to
Yeah,
this
I mean,
point.
I definitely agree. It's the definite win now. I mean, I think we're all in because we know in 2 to 3 years we're going to have to pay our guys. We're going to have to pay an exorbitant amount to keep Stroud. We're going to have to pay a good amount to keep Dell. We're going to have to pay an exorbitant amount to keep Will Anderson Jr. So we want to try and win before that happens,
Yeah,
because that's going to be. I mean, like every team has to go through it when you have to sign your best rookies back. Um, but getting 3 guys in 1 year that are way above average in talent, I don't think many expect that, and it definitely puts a cog in the system when you have to think, okay, 3 years from now we're going to have to really break out the checkbook. So let's sign everyone till that time, make all the contracts expire about then. That way we have the money we need to re-sign them, but also let's go all in right now so that we can try and win before that happens, and then readjust once we have to re-sign them. So
yeah, and in my case, I hope history repeats itself because it reminds me a little bit of what the Chargers did in Herbert's second year. Uh,
fair
with
enough, fair enough.
brought in Khalil Mack, Daniil Hunter, Khalil Mack. So I hope it repeats itself. But we've seen this happen before. I think obviously Stroud is good. I think obviously they project well for next year. So, um, you just hope that a lot of new faces are net positives as opposed to not being able to really fit in the system, whatever the issues may be. So, um, but again, I think this was the offseason that people expected from them, and I think they went about it the right way.
Yeah, for sure.
I will talk about my Colts briefly. I want to talk about the entire AFC South because I think they're kind of like they're each a case study in their own right. Because
Oh
the
yeah.
Texans hit the rookie quarterback, they hit a good rookie receiver, and they hit the rookie defensive end. Obviously, two of those were taken in the top three picks, so you hope they hit. But so they go in, they set the foundation with the rookies, they spend the money to make the team better. The Colts set the foundation in the draft for the past few years and re-signed their own guys is how they had to spend all their money. And people were upset about this because the Colts weren't making moves. But I said it before we started recording that if Michael Pittman Jr., Kenny Moore, and Grover Stewart all hit the market, they were all the best at their position.
Yeah.
So the Colts brought in the best receiver available, the best nose tackle available, and the best slot corner available. And people were mad because they weren't, Chris Ballard, they call him Bargain Bin Ballard, that he wasn't making any moves in free agency. And it's like he never does. That's not his philosophy. He has this money that he works within, and he drafts well, and he re-signs his own guys. So I don't. The panic button is being hit in Indianapolis too early because everybody's seeing, the Texans went out and spent money on these new guys to bring in. They're getting better. The Titans are getting better. It's like Chris Ballard is just standing idly by. He's not doing anything. It's like, yes, he is. Like he's having to pay his own good players. Like, God forbid that happens. And I think that it's fair for the Colts to say, we went 9-8 with the guy that we didn't expect to be starting this year. We lost Anthony Richardson earlier in the year, so they're betting obviously on him being back, being another big addition. They also had 7 out of their 10 rookies last year get hurt and not play for a significant amount of time. So there's a whole nother draft class coming in with the upcoming draft class. All these different things, people wanted to be mad about it. I think it's fine. Now, the thing I am going to talk about with the Colts is the L'Jarius Sneed rumors. Because when it was happening, of course, you look at the Colts cornerback room and you go, okay, Jalen Jones and Juju Brents are there. And they were both rookies last year, and they were fine. They're young. Kenny Moore is a primary slot corner. That's where he excels, obviously. That's his best fit. That's where he's going to play. The outside guys, there are questions. They're young. We haven't seen that much. We would like a veteran in the room. Kendall Fuller was a signing that I would have liked to see the Colts make. But they were in on L'Jarius Sneed. And we knew that from early last week. I said on our last podcast that if he was going to hit free agency, that he was going to be the number one priority for the Colts. And then when the Chiefs made him available for trade, the Colts and Titans, reportedly the Titans apparently didn't last very long. There were multiple teams. Colts, Titans, Lions, Falcons, I think all had kicked the tires on Sneed. And as of last Saturday, the Colts and the Chiefs, who Chris Ballard worked for the Chiefs before he became the GM of the Colts, so he's got context there, had agreed to trade compensation for Sneed. It was reported by guys like Destin Adams in Indianapolis, who I trust, by some accounts like Pretty Ricky, who was nailing things, who was great all offseason. I love free agency when those accounts pop up and get stuff right. I think it's fun. And then people are asking them all these types of questions about, are the Texans going to win the Super Bowl? And they have them report whatever. But so everybody, including Diana Rossini, reported that the Colts and Chiefs have had talks. The Colts guys reporting that the trade compensation's agreed to. It's about the contract compensation, saying that when deals get this far, usually they get done. So they felt that they could report based on their sources that the deal was done. Then they hit a snag Saturday night into Sunday, where whether it was the guaranteed money, whether it was Sneed came to the table with more money than the Colts expected him. Apparently he wants to get paid more than the deal that Jalen Johnson just got in Chicago, which would make him the highest paid corner. So they hit some type of bump where the Colts thought that they would be able to afford Snead, and then Snead came with a bigger number than maybe they thought he was going to ask. And then it was reported on Monday by Adam Schefter that none of this happened, that they had never talked. And the way that I'm thinking about it is they talked. There was, if the Colts beat writers who have been good say one thing, that they have had conversations. And then Diana Rossini for The Athletic said they had conversations. And then there are these other Chiefs reporters who said that they were having conversations. And then the ESPN guys and Stephen Holder and Adam Schefter say that it never happened. Those guys are being told they're getting their information from the front office, from like Chris Ballard himself.
Yeah.
So the way I'm thinking of it now, because now everybody just assumes the Colts are done. And I think the Titans have now emerged as the suitor, like the next team that's going to go after him.
Yeah, that's the thing I saw.
I saw that last night and today. The way I'm thinking about it, if right now, if you ask me, I think the Colts are still in it. I think that they're still trying to figure it out. And the reason I say that is because they hit a snag. The deal's done. They hit a snag with L'Jarius Sneed and his agent or whoever in terms of the contract negotiations. And I think that negotiations are played out in the media. It's a game that gets played all over Twitter. So when they can't figure it out, the Colts brass, whoever, runs to Adam Schefter and says, hey, we're done talking. There's nothing to be done here. And Adam Schefter reports it. So then L'Jarius Sneed's camp, who sees that the Colts are talking to Adam Schefter and saying, report that nothing's going on, they say, oh, your division rival is now offering me the most money. I think that there is a game being played between the Colts and Snead. I don't know if anything ends up getting done because we know Chris Ballard has a certain value that he places on everything that he will not bow down for anyone for. But I do think the Colts are still in it. I think they're trying to figure it out. And it's a reason that they haven't signed anybody. There is a pretty good chunk of money that's just sitting right now for the Colts that they haven't allocated. I think the Titans may be making a push. I think Snead's a really good player. But the Colts have a need at corner. I would assume the way I looked at it that a veteran corner would not handcuff you into taking a corner in the first round of this draft, which would also just add more youth to the room as a whole. I do think they're still working on it, but it has been an absolute mess on Colts Twitter because we go from, we're getting L'Jarius Sneed on Saturday to Monday, oh my God, there was never a chance and the world is melting. Bargain bin Ballard. Fire this guy. Yeah. So it was a mess. But to my knowledge, that is the entire story over the past 5 days.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That sounds like that's basically the timeline I had with a little bit less information. Basically, that came out that y'all basically had a deal done, and then Schefter came out and said, no, I don't know where they're getting that information. They've never talked. And then Titans are the lead runners and are already pretty close to making a deal, and then now nothing that I've heard at all.
Yeah, it's been radio silence.
That I do think it's especially, I mean, not an offensive thing, but I think the Colts especially play that media game quite a bit. I mean, I think it played out a lot with Jonathan Taylor last year.
Oh, yeah.
They're very savvy media-wise, and they know how to use that to their advantage, and they definitely do. So I do think there's a level of that going on. I think it makes too much sense for Snead to go to you guys, as much as I hate to say that. I don't know that what else you guys would use that money on unless you were going to try and bring in like the Justin Simmons or something that's going to come in. Or I just, for me, it makes too much sense. As soon as I saw that y'all had a deal, I wasn't surprised. I hated it, but I wasn't surprised. It makes a lot of sense.
I had prepared you for it a couple weeks ago.
Oh yeah,
I had mentioned it.
Yeah, I was hoping you were not right, but then I saw it and I was like, I mean, it makes sense. It lines up. So I'll be surprised, honestly, if there's not a deal done here in the next couple weeks for it, or at least before draft.
Yeah, and I think that the safety market is kind of stagnant, where there are guys like Justin Simmons and Quandre Diggs still sitting out there. And the Colts have apparently expressed interest in both. So something's going to have to move. I think that they are going to make a move for a veteran in the secondary one way or the other. And I think that it'll be telling. Like if Simmons immediately goes and signs somewhere else in the next couple of days, um, then I think we'll really get some movement. Once the free agency movement, something's going to have to give. If free agents start flying off the board all of a sudden, the Colts are going to have to decide what they want to do, and maybe they pay Snead a little bit more than they want to. I think it's worth it to get that type of guy in the locker room, but I'm not making the decisions. We can stop talking about our teams. We can talk about the other. We can talk about the other two shitty teams in our division. The Titans and the Jags. Where the Titans, again, I said the Colts repay their own players. The Texans spend to bring in new players, upgrade the team. The Titans and the Jaguars. Titans have a vision. They're trying to build around Will Levis, see what he's got this next year. They pay a lot of money for Calvin Ridley. I think a little bit too much money. I think you agree.
Yeah.
They also paid Tony Pollard, which scratched my head. I don't really know why they did that either. I'm not a Tony Pollard fan. I thought it was Tyjae Spears' season. I was excited for that. They signed Lloyd Cushenberry, the center, to replace a really bad center that they had last year, who I'm now blanking on his name, but he signed with the Dolphins. It is Aaron Brewer. That's what it is. He was awful. So, try and, again, see what you got in Levis. There's not much to say about what the Titans did. Spent a lot of money. But I think now they're definitely going tackle with the 7th pick. I think we said that a couple weeks ago, but then they went and got Ridley. People were talking about maybe they go receiver because it's Brian Callahan, who's their head coach now, and they took Jamar over Sewell, and it's like, okay, it's not going to happen. They need a tackle really bad. It'll be Joe Alt at 7 if that's what it comes down to. But the Jags, what the hell is their vision? What are they trying to do?
They're trying to freaking fireball it, dude. That's the crazy thing is like I can understand what the Titans are doing. Like they're signing decent guys at holes they need. They're spending way too much money, but at least they're getting guys they need. Whereas the the Jaguars, I legitimately question every decision that they make. It just isn't making sense. It isn't lining up to me whatsoever.
No.
They let some good guys go only to sign pennies on the dollar of what they need. It truly baffled me. That's why I was interested when you said they all had 4 different directions. I was like, well, what's the direction for the Jaguars?
I don't know.
They listen. Their defensive line is great. I mean, Eric Armstead, Josh Allen. I mean, cool. Like that's great. But outside of that, like their signings were awful. Like Gabe Davis, he's probably one of the worst wide receivers out there that were in that big wide receiver name. And they gave him 13 a year. I don't get it. He only disappointed in Buffalo. And then to just say, oh yeah, that'll be enough. We'll put, him out there and we'll put, I guess Evan Ingram.
Right now it's Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, and Zay Jones with Evan Ingram.
Those 3 names, like when you think of talented receivers, those are the 3 names that have talent that you never mention. Because they're not the names that are like, oh yeah, it's the names that are like, oh yeah, Christian Kirk. I mean, he's good. He's all right. Oh, Evan Ingram. I mean, yeah, he produces, but he's not like a hot topic. Like, but it's literally like they're assembling all of those guys that are like, when you mention their name, you're like, I mean, yeah, he's good, but why? It just makes zero sense. So yeah, that's why I said, like I said, I was very interested in what you said. Each four had their own direction. I was like, what is Jacksonville's? Because
the direction was no direction at all. I think they're spinning in circles. They're chasing their tail. We're entering, and neither of us are big Trevor Lawrence fans as it stands, but we are entering save Trevor Lawrence territory.
Yeah.
Like what they, in the past couple of years, like last year they made the trade for Calvin Ridley, which everybody's like, oh, nobody was thinking about Calvin Ridley because he got suspended. That's a good trade. And then he was fine. And then they can't resign him because the Titans paid him $25 million, but they can't get him back. They haven't done nearly enough to support Trevor Lawrence, and they're continuing to not do nearly enough. And now you're getting to the point where they got to pay him soon. And it's like they signed Eric Armstead, which was cool. and you put him next to Josh Allen. So, maybe their defense is fine, but they lost Rayshawn Jenkins and replaced him with Darnell Savage. And it's like,
Yep.
okay, like Savage may be worse than Jenkins. Uh, I don't, the, I will say, I would have, if that report was true, I would have traded the 17th pick for Brandon Ayuk.
Oh, 100%.
100%. I think I would
Before
have
the
done it in
Gabe
a
Davis
heartbeat.
signing. Before the Gabe Davis.
I think even with the Gabe Davis signing, I don't care. Gabe Davis stinks. That guy,
No,
push
no, and
him
I'm not. Yeah,
however
I'm
far
not
down.
saying Gabe Davis is good, too good to sign. What I'm saying is you've already, after signing Gabe Davis, you've already
Allocated
put
a
too
lot of
much
money.
Yeah, you've already put too
Yeah.
much into the wide receiver to lose the 17 for another one isn't worth it.
Yeah.
It makes that signing obsolete.
And you'd have to pay Ayuk, and apparently he's asking 25 million, which like that's just what Calvin Ridley signed for.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would have traded, and they're asking for Zay Jones, so they were taking a receiver. So
Yeah.
your three would have been Ayuk, Kirk, and Gabe Davis, and now it's like okay, now that's okay with Evan Ingram
Mm-hmm.
because Ayuk's that good. I think
Oh
he's a
yeah.
top 8 receiver, and but now you're rolling in as of right now, and they could draft one at 17. They still need to take a corner. They need help at linebacker, but now you're rolling with Gabe Davis, Christian Kirk, and Zay Jones, and it's like it's not Lawrence's fault. I don't know what you want him to do.
No. It's one of those where, and I like how you put it, is, I mean, the Colts aimed on re-signing their stars, and they did.
Mm,
The Texans aimed on making a splash and bringing in solid choices. They did. They're relying on that rookie depth. Titans, they wanted to spend money. They did,
yeah,
and it was efficient. The Jaguars, it did nothing. And I like the Calvin. So that's why I had a hard time, because I like the Calvin Ridley signing. It was way too much money, but I like it because it was almost like, hey, we're willing to give you like 16 mil for your talents, but we're gonna add on this extra money to screw over the Jags.
yeah,
And that's why I loved it, because it was very like, yes, you overspent, but also you took a division rivals player and they had to replace him with Gabe Davis. And that feels like what
yeah,
they did is they went, oh shoot, we're losing Calvin Ridley, Gabe Davis, and just shot their wad and were like, oh, didn't think about that
yeah,
one. And yeah, like I said, I think every team in this division ironically has a plan except for Jaguars, because a year ago we would have said the exact opposite.
yeah. Jacksonville was the division winner last year. I had him as a Super Bowl contender
Yeah.
last year. I had him at like 13-4 because, or yeah, 13-4 because the division was going to be so bad with the Colts and Texans with rookie quarterbacks and the Titans being awful. We all projected the Titans not being very good, but
Yeah.
now it's the complete. I wouldn't be shocked if the Jaguars finished last in this division. I still don't think the Titans are very good, but I like the Titans' direction more than the Jaguars. I There are questions that a lot of people are going to need to answer, and I don't think they project very well in the next season. I'm not very confident in them, especially after the slide they had.
Yeah,
So
Jaguars are gonna have to answer a lot of questions for their fans, because I'm not a Jaguars fan. I dislike Jaguars fans, dislike Titans fans. I can tolerate Colts fans, especially since
yeah,
I know you and I've kind of grown on them. But I mean, the Jaguars fan, I feel bad for them. I mean,
yeah,
this team doesn't seem like you have much to look forward to. I mean, you pretty much just have to ride or die on Trevor Lawrence, and at this point, I haven't seen enough out of Trevor Lawrence to give me that much faith. So
mm.
I definitely feel for him.
So we can hit. What are we? We're at an hour 13. Do you
We
want
can
to
each go
hit?
one more.
Yeah, hit quickly on a
Yeah.
couple of the. Yeah,
Yeah. So I'll start. I'll go with So I have on here Falcons, and I have Vikings. I'll hit on Vikings because we kind of already talked about the main ones from the Falcons, Cousins and Mooney.
yeah,
So for the Vikings, I think the Vikings killed it, and that's partly because they got. I mean, it was funny because we pretty much traded edge rushers, which is funny. But I think they do fit better on these teams. Vikings are very much looking to build forward, build young, and build for the future. Not that the Texans aren't, but the Texans need that veteran presence that the Vikings didn't need right now. Like I kind of talked about, Daniil Hunter is that experience that can give more advice to Will Anderson as opposed to Greeny, who he's great and he's older, but he's only 26. He's never been that top 10 defensive edge in the league. I think this gives him a good team to grow on. And a good pay to do it, honestly. And then they brought in one of my favorite outside linebackers, Van Ginkel, who I just think is a clutch signing. He did so well filling in for Phillips. Love that man. Saw him on some documentary stuff, and he's a really good guy. His family's adorable. It's hilarious. So really happy for him and the Vikings for getting him. And then they signed Cashman. I mean, I have all the love in the world for Cashman. He actually balled out last year, and to get him in that purple, I think is going to look real good on him, and I think he's going to be a real asset to them. So I think just even with those 3 signings, not counting the other ones they did, I think they definitely amped up their team. Yeah, they lost Kirk Cousins, but they filled some serious holes that they needed, recovered some holes, and kept things pretty cheap on the back end for them.
And Brian Flores is still calling their defense, so
yeah,
that's a good situation regardless. I think Grenard, we could see some pretty stupid numbers from Jonathan Grenard next year, I think, because they blitz at the highest rate in the league. Everybody knows they do it, and that's when Grenard can pin his ear back and just go. That's when he thrives. So I think that I like the Vikings. I think that the quarterback is obviously – we can talk briefly. They traded for the Texans' first overall selection. I think they are trying to, like everybody else seems to. They're packaging it to get up, whether that's at 3 or 4. We will see. Maybe it's at 5, and the Chargers are just trying to collect as many picks as they can, which I think would make sense. But we'll be able to have a better idea, I think, of what the Vikings are post-draft.
Yeah, I think post-free agency, I saw a lot of people mock them trading up to the 4. I don't see that happening. I do not see the Arizona Cardinals trading out of Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah, I agree.
If we're saying 1, 2, and 3 are the top 3 quarterbacks, and then 4 is Marvin Harrison, I don't see a world in which the Cardinals take any type of move for Marvin Harrison. Now, if it's something crazy like a Trey Lance trade where they're getting 3 firsts, cool, I could see that. But just for the 11 and the 23, I don't think there's a chance that they do it. They'd have to put in some major draft capital or players to move up to that. Otherwise, I think Arizona would be stupid to trade up to number 4. And I think, honestly, the Vikings would be stupid to trade that much considering they know they're taking Marvin Harrison Jr. So, if you go to the next pick, number 5, Chargers, who are obviously in the market to trade back. I mean, it's not that crazy to think that they would trade back, and you can get it for much cheaper because it's not Marvin Harrison. I think that's the deal to do, and I think that benefits both sides. So that's why I see a lot of people saying, oh, they're going to trade with the Cardinals. No, I think it makes more sense for them to trade up into the Chargers pick. And it makes a lot of sense for the Chargers to trade back to that 11 and that 23, giving them a bunch. Now, whether that's what happens or not, I have no clue. But that's what makes the most sense for me. And I think they still get the same guy, whether it's J.J. McCarthy, which is getting a bunch of hype, or whoever they want at that high pick. I think they trade up to 5.
I think McCarthy's getting a lot of smoke because they want Drake May, in my opinion. I think that's the way they're going about it. This is lying season in the NFL.
Oh, yeah.
I think everybody's trying to hide that they actually want May. And May's getting all the bad publicity, and McCarthy's getting all this good stuff. So
it's pretty familiar
I think
to
it makes
last
sense.
year.
Oh, yeah. Very, very much so. And I think the Cardinals, they made that trade back last year. So they've already done this and acquired the extra capital. That's why they have 2 first-round picks this year. So I think I'd be interested to see if they'd be willing to trade down. I think it would have to be a big package. I also wonder, though, if they do trade out of 4 and lose Harrison. Because last year, if you remember, they traded out of 3 to 12 and then went 12 to 6 to still get Paris Johnson, who they're rumored to take at 3. So I wonder if the receivers are close enough to where they may go 4 to 11 and then 11 maybe back to 5 with the Chargers to take Harrison because the Vikings are going quarterback. I think the Chargers would take Harrison in that case. Or maybe they're close enough to where they go 11 to 8 with the Falcons to take Odunze. I think Odunze fits with what the Cardinals want to do. He gets a lot of Larry Fitzgerald comps. I think a lot. Mm-hmm. It's fun to project all this different stuff, and I think this draft is the amount of trades you could do in this draft is ridiculous. I'm going to fire off some thoughts on a couple of teams.
Yeah,
I think that the Jets are the most win now a roster has maybe ever looked.
100.
And if it if it doesn't end in a Super Bowl, probably. I mean, I think you have to consider it a failure. But they get Mike Williams, who I think could still be productive. Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams, Brees Hall. If Aaron Rodgers comes back from the Achilles and plays fine, I think the defense is good enough for that team to be very competitive. Um, the Raiders, we talked about pre pod. I don't know. I don't know what they think they are. Like you give huge money to Christian Wilkins to play alongside Max Crosby, which will be fun. But then you pay Gardner Minshew 12.5 a year. You have the Aiden O'Connell Minshew QB battle, but they also might take one in the draft. But the rest of the roster isn't really good enough to be paying Christian Wilkins $110 million. I just don't know where they think they stand in a division with the Chiefs.
Yeah, I think they're in the rookie head coach syndrome.
Yeah, probably very well could be. And I think Pierce could obviously be the guy there, but yeah, I think they made a lot of, kind of
Yeah, I like Pierce.
interesting
I
moves.
think he's still a little inexperienced, is what's showing, honestly.
Yeah, and they got brought in Tom Telesco from the Chargers too as their new GM, so
Yeah.
he's got experience, but not the poster boy for good GM decisions anyway. The Steelers, I think, are interesting, trying to get more competitive in the division. Patrick Queen, I think, is a good signing. I like what Queen offers you, and I think he fits in what the Steelers want to do. And then the Russell Wilson, Justin Fields kind of uh, debate that'll be going into training camp. I think there will be some type of QB battle. I don't know if Russ is cooked completely. I think that the let Russ cook offense in Seattle ruined him in Sean Payton's offense because Payton's offense is so play in the system and the system will do the work. And Russ doesn't want to do that. He wants to run around and throw deep balls and shout yippee and click his heels and stuff. Uh, so I don't know if he's completely cooked. They say right now that he's the starter. I wouldn't be surprised if week 1 they decide that Fields is, does more for them than what Russell can do at this point in his career, especially since Russell is on the veterans minimum because the Broncos are paying all his money.
Yeah.
Uh, and then the Eagles, I don't know what to think. Saquon's cool. I like Bryce Huff as a signing. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's back. I think they're retooling a little bit. Um, I think that I heard somebody talking about how you might be able to take Jalen Hurts out of the tush push and put Saquon in for it, which would be an interesting kind of wrinkle and
That sounds kind of
less
valid.
less chance of an injury for Hurts. I think that could be something that they consider doing. I think Saquon does still have some juice. I think he's still a good running back, especially if they
Oh,
keep him
yeah.
healthy. Um, yeah, I think they're interesting. I think they're shopping Hassan Reddick. Apparently, they're shopping both Reddick and Sweat, but then paid Sweat to an extension. So Reddick apparently still available, and obviously Bryce Huff supposed to take his spot. And then finally, the Bears are the best situation that any number 1 overall pick has ever had. Right?
Good God, there's never been a more true statement.
They it's the best situation that anybody has stepped into as a number 1 overall quarterback, and it's going to be Caleb Williams. Um, I think we both agree that I think the Keenan Allen trade was great for a fourth. I wondered a little bit. I talked about it with you on a text. I wondered a little bit what the Chargers were doing after cutting Mike Williams and then trading Keenan
Hmm.
because they are in the position to trade down, but like, shouldn't they take a receiver? Do you really want to run out Quentin Johnson and Darius Davis and Josh Palmer? I don't
So
know.
I love Josh Palmer. I am
Yeah,
a
you are a
Josh
fan of
Palmer
Josh Palmer.
truther. I'm not a fan of Quentin Johnston. I will
No.
say that, but I do think they have a wide receiver 1 in Josh Palmer, and I think he has shown flashes that he could be. And so I think that's what they're thinking there, and then they're hoping to grab like a wide receiver 2/wide receiver 3 to complement Quentin Johnston later in this draft since it is so deep.
It is deep,
But
yeah.
there's definitely been some questionable decisions, absolutely firebombing that offense and not
Yeah.
doing anything on the defense.
Yeah. Keeping Bosa was interesting, especially after they asked him to take a pay cut. Well, and then he did take a pay cut, I think. I think they convinced him to do it. And then Mac
Yeah, they
restructured.
both did. Mac and
Yeah.
him both kind of restructured, took a pay cut, and saved some money on that end.
But regardless, Caleb Williams throwing to Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, potentially another receiver, Cole Kmet. I think it will be another receiver if Odunze gets to 9. I think that
And
could be.
that's what I've been thinking, honestly, because I've been
Yeah.
wondering. Once that happened, I was like, man, they still have number 9. Are they still going to take like an Odunze or something if he falls? And I don't think you can say they won't.
Yeah, I don't think you can either. I
They
think
don't need to, but how insane would it be
it
if
would
they
be
did?
crazy. It would be crazy. Yeah. You have any quick thoughts on any teams that I haven't named?
Not that you haven't named. I will say Steelers. I like. Kind of touched on the Russell Wilson, Justin Fields point. That's a big thing I like. I kind of think it will be Russell Wilson this year. So
Yeah.
from all reports, from what it sounded like, is Justin Fields wanted to go to the Steelers
Hmm.
because Russell Wilson signed there. So I guess basically he said he's modeled his game after Cam Newton until right around college when he started seeing Russell Wilson, and he was like, that's then who I wanted to really model my game after. And so I think this is both a choice by Justin Fields and by the Steelers, where he goes, hey, let me sit behind him for a year, because he obviously has major respect for him. And he goes, hey, as long as he doesn't run this train way off the tracks, how about we play the long game? Let me learn from this guy. He may not be the great guy he used to be, but he at least knows how he was and what he did to be that. Let him teach me, and then let me take the reins like next year or the year after and really get us going. So I really like that situation. Obviously, they got Pat Queen too, who I love. He's always been one of my favorite guys. For some reason, I was hoping we would sign him. I don't think we were even close to really signing him, or even thought about signing him, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I don't know if there's any other team that really sticks out to me. I mean, aside from just saying that the Dallas Cowboys really screwed the pooch. They haven't
Yeah.
done anything, and at this point, their starting running back is Deuce Vaughn, who is 5'5".
All in my ass from Skip
Yeah,
Bayless. That was a
so
great tweet.
that's definitely a concerning situation. But that'd really be the only team that has any note to me. Otherwise than that, I think it was pretty much mid or just a little bit above, a little below. Nothing crazy to mention though.
Yeah, and like we said, nobody wins the Super Bowl in free agency. So,
Exactly.
if your team didn't do much, maybe that's a sign that they think that they're a better team than you think they are. And
Yeah.
they probably have a better idea. So,
For real.
and this episode went long. I expected it to. There's a lot of stuff to cover.
Oh yeah.
The next one, probably a post free agency mock draft. Obviously, getting into more of the draft stuff. We are now like 40 something days, 43 days away, something like that. I feel like this
Yep.
draft's sneaking up
Getting
on
real
me.
nice and close.
I feel like it's sneaking up on me compared to last year, probably because I team needed a quarterback last year, so it felt like it was forever. But
Yeah.
I'm excited. But I am
Oh
good
yeah.
for today if you are.
Yep.
All
All
right.
right. I'll see you next time.
Peace.